Welcome, everyone. So this morning we welcome you. We did have a little bit of a delay there just with our presenters, so we apologize for that, but we're ready to roll now. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for being here this morning. This is our part 2 of the Elevating Educational Assistant Practice for Complex Learning Needs. My name is Raymond Rolston. I'm an independent contractor for CAS. I recently retired after 33 years in education. I was 17 years as a classroom teacher, 10 years as a principal, 6 years as director of learning support services. And over my 33 years in education, the role of the educational assistant has fundamentally changed. So back in my day, when I first started teaching, our best EAs could easily adapt and support any type of learner. As you all know, today's EAs are vital to managing a lot of things in the classroom and unprecedented complexities. They're actively navigating mental health crises, nonverbal communication barriers, medical needs, English language learning, severe behavioral challenges, and they provide literacy and numeracy interventions, just to mention a few things. So really today our objective is to identify how our system and school leaders can recruit, develop, and retain high-performing EAs to support our students. So just a few housekeeping things. As Rogan mentioned, this session is being recorded. So after today, you will receive the slide deck followed by a learning guide. And all of these documents will be available on the CAS website along with access to the full recording of this session. So welcome. We are aiming for about 90 minutes today. So let's get started. I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Treaty 6 First Nations, the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Dene, and Nakota Nations. As we are meeting virtually, I also want to acknowledge the many traditional lands and treaty territories from which you are all joining us. I invite you at this moment to recognize the Indigenous stewards of the land where you are currently residing and work, and to honor their enduring connection to these territories. So welcome. Here is our agenda for today. So we have 3 parts to it. The introduction section will set the stage for our 3 stories of practice, and we're really excited with the stories of practice for today because we have 3 divisions that are from different geographical areas. We've got a northern story, a central story, and a southern story to share with everyone. And to make the most of our time together, following each of these presentations, we will pause to allow for reflection, questions, or thoughts. So let's begin. So this session addresses the challenge facing many educational system leaders, and it is really rooted in this question. So how can leadership practices and school environments be intentionally designed to honor local contexts while ensuring educational assistant excellence and retention in the face of the increasing classroom complexity? So really, again, today is an opportunity for us to learn from one another's experiences, to deepen our collective wisdom, and to more effectively support and enhance the vital work of our educational assistants. And once again, thank you for being here and investing in this important work. So this series has numerous participant outcomes, as you can see here on the screen, but we also want to just take a moment just to recognize and understand that each school authority is navigating its own path. And we know that the context of your own story is really critical in when you're looking at what you're going to be doing in your division specifically. We also just want to remind everyone that this session falls under many of the SLQSs and LQS competencies. And for those of you who are regulated CAS members that are participating today, you will earn 1.5 CAS continuing education program credits. And make sure that you check after the session to confirm that you have received these credits. a list will actually go to CAS and they should be credited, but we always ask you just to check on that. All right. So we just wanted to start here just with the CAS research report that was completed by Edgar Schmidt last fall. So just for a little bit of background here, in December of 2024, CAS called out for a consultant to develop a provincial resource for system education in the area of educational assistant recruitment and retention. And so this report was written, it was researched by Edgar, and I'll just do a quick summary here of what he found. In our last session, if you want a complete overview, in part one, he did talk about all of the pieces, and this also is now on the CAS website for you to reference as well. So this study actually involved 14 school authorities across Alberta, and it was with educational leaders, and they represented over 2,100 EAs in Alberta, representing 128,000 students and approximately 17% of Alberta's student population. So the research revealed that recruitment focuses on interpersonal skills, usually hiring for heart, but we also know that the role requires highly specialized clinical and pedagogical knowledge. 100% of the authorities that were in this research found it difficult or very difficult to hire qualified EAs. 58% of them struggled to retain staff. They identified that as a struggle. And the professional learning is inconsistent in most of these school authorities, with 50% receiving only 1 to 3 sessions per year. EAs often provide the most direct support, but are frequently excluded from student-focused decision-making. And we know that that's been brought up a lot. There's also limited access to professional development, which leaves many of our EAs feeling underskilled for the complexity of the student needs that they're serving. And we also know that there are other barriers and hurdles, I guess, challenges, which are ongoing funding shortfalls, lack of leadership buy-in, and school authorities that are in isolation. So this report also had some recommendations, and they formally include EAs in collaborative meetings and multidisciplinary teams, especially with people like our OTs, SLPs, and etc. They also recommended in there implementing some paid professional learning time, some peer mentorship, and communities of practice. And the last recommendation that is strong is to move toward province-wide standards, stable funding, and non-hierarchical peer support systems. So on that note, we are ready to begin. So we are going to move on now to our stories of practice. And we will welcome our first two presenters from up north. We have Jen Fricker-McDougall and Kirsten McConnell, who will start us off with their story of practice from Fort McMurray Catholic Schools.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I'm Kirsten. I'm the Director of Inclusion here at Fort McMurray Catholic, and I'm joined by Jen. She's one of our lead administrators, and she's currently a school principal at Our Lady of the Rivers Elementary School. And we're grateful to share some of the work happening here at FMCSD around inclusive education, and particularly how we strategically deploy over 250 support staff in our division to respond to the increasingly complex literacy, behavioral, and language needs. We want to share our story of practice in moving from traditional staffing allocations to a more responsive, needs-based model, ensuring that resources are still strategically deployed to support our student learning, to support early intervention and improved outcomes across all of our schools. Through ongoing data monitoring and flexible staff deployment, supports are continuously adjusted to ensure precision, timeliness, and impact. And for those of us in the LQS, this approach reflects key competencies, including building collaborative learning communities, leading evidence-informed practice, and developing staff capacity to meet diverse learner needs. And at system level, it aligns with the SLQS by strengthening organizational coherence, using data to inform resource allocation, and ensuring every student receives the right support at the right time in the right way. And Rogan, we've lost our ability to advance the slides, so do you mind just moving us one ahead, please? Oh, perfect. Thank you. So to understand our model, you need to understand our context. We live in a complex northern community where we partner in a very authentic way with our community. We have limitations, so we don't have the same services as some of our larger centers. And we've needed over time to collaborate and be creative with how we attract services. So, for example, we've invited physicians, developmental pediatricians to our community to run autism clinics hosted at AHS at our hospital with Fort McMurray Public Schools and then here at our central office. So, this not only allows families to access this specialty in our community as opposed to driving or traveling to Edmonton, but it expedites diagnoses for families. We benefit from strong and collaborative partnerships with Fort McMurray Public Schools because, as boards in the same community, we often have shared resources and initiatives over time. So, one example right now is we currently host a shared CASA classroom. We have the classroom within a Fort McMurray Catholic elementary school, but we share the cost of the teacher and have an agreement that we can each refer 6 children per semester to the program. We advocate for each other because we recognize supporting each other supports our shared community of learners. We've developed relationships with our pediatric psychiatrist in town. We typically only have one, such that we can reach out to him to gain emergency interventions for our students that are in significant crisis. We're also proud of our strong relationships with our surrounding communities. We have many students join us from Fort McKay, Anzac, Janvier, Chard, Conklin, and Fort Chipewyan communities. Many students from these communities attend Fort McMurray Catholic schools and some through a boarding home program that supports student placements in our municipality. We hire an Indigenous liaison in each building to be key point individuals who can connect students with any social emotional needs, academic tutoring, and cultural learning. They also ensure we still have a strong connection with the families back in their home community. We celebrate success through our exceptional Indigenous student grad rates. Our children are recognized in the community at the annual traditional celebration of achievement, which is a traditional graduation ceremony that gathers our Indigenous graduates together. Over time, our educational assistants have joined CUPE. We hire about 358 educational assistants in our school division, and overall, we employ approximately 901 employees. Each school has, at a minimum, a full-time principal, a full-time vice principal, a full-time classroom support teacher, which is a special education teacher, a full-time Indigenous liaison, and an assigned school counselor. Our high schools have 3 vice principals and a larger inclusion team assigned to their school. And we work very hard to hire and to also retain our staff. Over time, we've certainly struggled to attract staff to our community. We've experienced many challenges in our community, a high cost of living in a remote area. But the positive is that we have an opportunity to capitalize on the staff that we have because we have a commitment to retaining our employees. We are not as geographically vast as many other school divisions. Fort McMurray is divided into many areas if you've had the blessing to visit. Our schools are either located south or north of the bridge. That's our marker in town. And our 3 high school programs are all located in one residential area, but our elementaries are spread out. In many cases, ECS and early learning classrooms are very linguistically dense environments. English exposure outside of school is limited in some of our schools. And there's a wide range, of course, of academic readiness, especially in those early years. So we're diverse in who we employ. We consider our English as an additional language staff to be multi-talented. We currently employ staff that speak Ukrainian and Arabic in our schools, but more specifically at Jen's school, at Our Lady of the Rivers School, which is a school we're going to be highlighting shortly. We have staff that speak and are fluent in Tagalog, French, and Cantonese. This is a very multicultural school. We celebrate Culture Day soon here next week to share food, traditional dances. The school reflects our student stakeholders. We want our children to see themselves in their library and through their literature choices. We do a morning prayer in O Canada that aren't only in English, but are in other languages as well. This context is what drove some of our urgency and gave us some clarity in designing the complexity team's work at Our Lady of the River. This is a very busy school in our downtown area, and it is the school that's indicated by our gray arrow on the screen. We have a modified calendar in Fort McMurray where professional learning Fridays, or PLFs as we call them, are built in for professional time. So while our EAs, they don't work every PLF because there are students in the buildings on those days, we do have 2 full PLF days of the year where educational assistants come in for the day to work with the ATA staff of the building. This allows for some extra time to collaborate and for staff to be exposed to quality professional development, typically presented by our partners at the consortium, some of our consultants and contractors, and district staff. This allows for a different engagement opportunity, and PLFs allow for ATA, EA teams to not only just connect, but plan for the students they actually work with on a day-to-day basis. So we try to maintain an intentional focus on developing EAs that deliver consistent, high impact support. We try for ongoing professional learning grounded in evidence-based practices. We try to deliver consistent materials and supports to ensure clarity across our classrooms. That includes structured collaboration between EAs and specialists. We really encourage EA practicum placements and hands-on opportunities to build skills in real classroom contexts, sometimes with the hope that we can hire those staff that do their practicums with us. And we try to ensure that our EAs are highly trained, confident, and integral to our student success because we know that investing in them is an upfront expense, but it's worthwhile because we want to recruit and then retain. So what we see in our data through staff surveys is that we know we need to continue to work on high quality professional learning for staff. And we do survey our staff and we get both quantitative and qualitative data. We ensure that the survey responses are truly confidential because we want them to be authentic in what they share with us. We recognize that we are fortunate to have a significant human resource base, but the key question isn't always just how many staff we have, it's how we deploy them. So like many school divisions, we have different EA classifications based on the specialized qualifications required for the posting. So we have typical classroom educational assistants, we have specialized literacy focused EAs, we have behavior and complexity EAs, we have English as an additional learning support staff. We do employ speech language pathologist assistants, multicultural and Indigenous liaisons. We have early learning intervention staff. And of course, then we have Jordan's principal funded postings as well. We support those strong EA practicums, as I'd shared. We're open-minded to taking practicum students from many institutions. And right this semester, we have students with us that are from Lethbridge, Red Deer, Lloydminster, Edmonton, and here local in Fort McMurray. We've shifted our thinking from assigned support to responsive support. Each school has a CST or a classroom support teacher, a special education teacher that hold a master's degree, typically specifically in special education, and they manage support and place our EA staff in schools. They're responsible for managing student ISPs, ISSPs, IPPs, and what we call wellness plans, or some places may refer to them as behavior plans and safety plans. They also create each EA schedule. The CSTs work with the staff to ensure that they have in place growth plans. This is another way that, aside from those staff surveys, we can glean the type of professional development we want to offer our staff. Our CSTs are very invested, and there are monthly CST meetings managed by myself as the Director of Inclusion. We discuss upcoming relevant action items and deadlines, but we also discuss how to support the support staff, so including how we can build in training and professional development opportunities. We engage our CSTs to become train the trainers for as many programs as is reasonable, so we can also do that local permeation of training. Every October and January, when we have ATA professional development days, we concurrently run a support staff PD day. And this is now written into the QP collective agreement, but this is something that we've done as a school board long before we had that unionization of staff. And this is in addition to the PLF days that our EAs do join. So last fall during ATA job action, we looked at how, in a difficult time, we could maybe leverage the time with our EAs. And so we'd already planned our EAPD days, so we just expanded that into many weeks of professional development. And we were able to activate some of those out of scope teams, such as professionals that are our social workers, school counselors, and they provided professional development. So we can now say all EAs have been trained in the regulated classroom, which is something that would typically take us over a school year to be able to do. During that time, but also at our EAPD days, we provide professional development, including first aid, CPR, naloxone training, American Sign Language, AAC devices, grief and loss, self-care and education, Recovery Alberta sessions, land-based learning and blanket exercise, literacy and numeracy supports, social emotional learning and self-regulation strategies, English as additional language, foundations of FASD, and of course, many more. And these are opportunities where we see that we can foster capacity and build on our staff's skills, because when they have more tools, they're more confident, and then they're better able to support many different students in our schools. We also offer sessions where support staff can share with their own colleagues their lived experience and tricks of the trade. Because while we typically see our CSTs as EA mentors, we know there's a wealth of experience and a lot to be gained by peer-to-peer mentorship. When our staff did return to schools in the fall, the EAs were certainly very enhanced in their skills, and we heard that as a collective in feedback through surveys. Oftentimes, we allocate training and funds into staff based on the needs of a building, but those learnings don't always translate into other buildings or to other roles. So during that job action, we built on more general abilities and knowledge so that we supported everyone's skill set. In addition to having CSTs as a support person for EAs, any challenges that do come up are directed to our HR director, and she specifically manages the QP staff portfolio and any other jobs that are out of scope. So this also helps to maintain that open and collaborative relationship with our support staff. So we survey our school staffs every year. There are separate surveys for each group that we engage, and overall we look at getting feedback to make the district stronger. Some feedback we've heard is that our support staff feel excluded from student discipline decisions. So this made us decide as senior admin to engage our municipality and IIRP, which is the International Institute for Restorative Practices, on some training. We invited staff that are EAs to join us, and it helped us to understand each other's roles in discipline and to have a different lens on student suspensions. We collect data in a lot of different ways, so our survey results help to guide us. And with an increase in complexity in classrooms, we know we needed to be more responsive because we can't have staff getting hurt at work. So we made a decision recently to invest in SMG, or Safe Management Group training, and we will be rolling that out over the next year. As a next step, we're beginning a division-wide inventory of support staff roles, including mapping where EAs are assigned, what specialized roles do exist, and how programming staffing is distributed across our schools. And the purpose isn't evaluation, it's just clarity because we need a shared understanding of where support currently exists to be able to plan more effectively. So as we've shared, this work is rooted in building staff capacity and creating aligned systems of support. And Jen's going to walk us through how that came to life at the school level through the development and implementation of a complexity team at Our Lady of the Rivers School. Good morning, everyone. So before we get into how we set up our complexity team, I just want to share a bit about our school. So this will help everyone, I think, understand our model and how we determined how to set up our complexity team. So historically, our building has faced some fairly significant challenges, including a flood, and we are located in a really high impact fire zone. So if you've been to Fort McMurray, as you drive in, there's neighborhoods up on top of a hill, and then I call it the valley. And then there are neighborhoods as you head north. And so we're right in the area where we would be surrounded by trees. If there's a lot of smoke, it tends to settle down in our area, which can cause a lot of anxiety and different things for our staff and our students. So these events have unfortunately resulted in a loss of a lot of our resources over time and required our staff to repeatedly build their classrooms and materials. So as a result, this is a uniquely complex environment to teach in, where resilience and adaptability are really essential. So OLR, or Our Lady of the River School, serves as a highly diverse and rapidly shifting student population. So over 85% of our students are EAL learners, which significantly shapes both our instructional design and staffing needs. So that being said, our complexities are very multi-layered. So we have trauma, we have some behavioral concerns, we have communication barriers, we have poverty. This past week, we had a student come in and he asked me to open up his backpack, and a cockroach climbed out. So we have all of the things at our school. And it's not a static population, it's very fluid. We always have ongoing newcomer enrollment, which means our systems have to be responsive and flexible and intentional. So many of our families are when they're new to the community, they may start off living down in our downtown area, but eventually as they become or get work or become established, they do move sometimes to more to the north side or the south side of our city. So we do have, I would say, typically between 450 and 470 students at any given time. In many cases, our ECS and early elementary classrooms are linguistically dense, and there isn't a lot of English language speaking outside of our school. So there is a wider range of academic readiness at OLR, especially in our early years. And because of this, our complexity student population, when we were creating our team, we were looking at how we can put together a needed, structured, and efficient and data-informed approach to ensure we were meeting the diverse needs of our students. And so this context is what drove our design in creating our complexities teamwork. So right now we are a very busy school. We have 460 students and 60 staff members. Hold on one second, my mouse is just stuck here, sorry. And we have 2 portables being added to our building. So we have no additional space. So when we are trying to create a complexity team, please keep in mind that our teacher is working on a rolling cart. Sometimes she uses my office space. Sometimes she uses a counselor's room. We have this giant art table in the middle of our school. Sometimes she's working from there. So before I get into how we divided up our work, I'll share a little bit about our ECS and Division 1 classrooms. So in our EAP classrooms, we have an AM and PM crew, and so we have 20 coded students between both classes. 4 that require toileting, 13 behaviors, and 5 mild mod students. In kindergarten, we have an AM and a PM class where we have 16 coded students between both classes, 1 toileted, 10 behavior, 3 mild mod kiddos. In grades 1 and 2, we have 5 classes of students. We have 27 coded children, 10 with behavioral needs, and in our grade 1 classes alone, we have 12 one-to-one students. So we are a very unique space and we love it, but some days can certainly have its challenges. So our next portion of this, I will talk about how we put together our complexity team. So as everyone knows, it was a fairly quick launch when we heard about the complexity grants coming into our building. So our work began fairly quickly following an interview process where we hired our teacher, and she officially started at our school at the end of March. And within days, we convened a team meeting with one of the directors of curriculum instruction and assessment to clarify purpose and establish a shared focus for the remaining 9 weeks of the school year. So we knew we needed to keep things simple and do things well to ensure the biggest bang for our buck with the limited time constraints. So given this limited time frame, our guiding question became, how do we maximize impact with the students already closest to the benchmark? So this allowed us to prioritize efficiency, focus, and instructional return. So we made the decision after looking at our data to concentrate our efforts on students identified as tier 2 or below benchmark, or what we call our yellows from our Acadience data. So our tier 2 below benchmark kiddos make up approximately 15% of our student body in terms of reading and comprehension. So these learners represented the greatest opportunity for our short cycle growth with the goal of moving them towards at level and closing some of those gaps by the end of this school year. So when we were planning forward for our complexity EAs, we decided to deploy one as a full-time resource to stabilize our early entry and kindergarten environments for our most vulnerable learners. So our ECS language support staff helps run centers that are focused on oral language development. And it's kind of similar to what our old school, maybe people call them our mild modiers would do. And so for many of our students, reading challenges are rooted in that language acquisition and not in cognitive abilities. So we wanted to provide as much exposure to the English language and help develop vocabulary in order for them to have some foundation for their literacy success. And our second support staff member was assigned to our grades 1 to 2 classrooms to ensure that students with complex needs receive their necessary scaffolding in core academic areas, regardless of their official funding status. So again, we really are focusing on literacy support in those classrooms. So we have 5 grade 1 and 2 classrooms, and that support staff member is working on sound symbol, high frequency words, reading fluency, and comprehension. So when we look at our data-driven identification and grouping, we weren't sure where we were going to start, but we looked at our student profiles for groupings, and we decided to implement a structured data collection process, and we're using UFly for that. So the UFly placement assessments across grades 3 to 6. And this has allowed us to establish a consistent baseline of student phonics knowledge. So for our school division, UFly is not happening in grades 3 to 6. Teachers already do this in kindergarten to grade 2, so that's why we did those profiles for our groupings in grades 3 to 6. So from this data, we have grouped students across multiple grade levels rather than the traditional classroom structure where possibly before we would say all grade 5 students who may be struggling are in a group. So now it's cross grade level groups. And this has ensured alignment to specific decoding needs rather than the grade level alone. So we also made sure not to duplicate support for our well below students who are already receiving what we call tier 3 literacy intervention. And that happens from our EAL and our literacy educational assistants who are already doing this work in our building. So this has preserved system efficiency and it has also prevented over-servicing. So we have also created a centralized data spreadsheet, and it's shared with our whole staff to track weekly mastery and retention. So this allows for real-time instructional adjustments and responsive grouping decisions. And our complexity team works closely with our literacy EAs, and we're able to pivot as needed to support the students. So teachers also work with the students and communicate with the team to make adjustments. So it really has become this lovely school-wide collaborative approach. So for targeted instruction, we're looking at both phonics and transferring authentic literacy tasks. So each group engages in a structured quick write where students respond to an image. So they discuss it orally, they write for 10 minutes independently, and then they share. And this has allowed our team to observe whether phonics instruction is transferring to written output. We've also embedded intentional vocabulary development where students are encouraged to refine their word choice. So something where a student might write sad, we're really trying to develop those skills and maybe they write frustrated or upset. So trying to strengthen their expressive language alongside their decoding skills. So this approach has ensured that literacy instruction is not isolated skill practice, but it's directly connected to writing, oral language, and comprehension. And so when we look at progress monitoring, this is ongoing. So we continue to progress monitor. So every Friday where we have school, progress monitoring is conducted collaboratively with our complexity teacher and our literacy educational assistants. We do use the UFly aligned assessments to measure retention of the specific phonics patterns that were taught that week. So for example, they're given 4 words that might follow a certain phonics pattern. So if we were looking at like CK words like clock or pick, they're also given 2 irregular high frequency words. So those words that aren't decodable like says or goes. And then they have 1 dictated sentence that integrates current and previous learning. So this structure of progress monitoring allows our team to immediately determine whether students can transfer the isolated skill and connect it to their writing. So our results are then adjusted to decide whether our students can move forward, if we need to provide reinforcement, or if they can exit from intervention when benchmarks are met. So ensuring that fluidity and responsive grouping. And some really exciting news is this past week, we actually had 4 students exit intervention, which was a really great reason for us to celebrate at OLR. And then when we look at our strategic staffing, just to recap a little, these positions were created as early intervention supports to help close literacy gaps and support student success. So as we have started to build student confidence and create more consistent supports, we're also beginning to see some improvements in behavior and classroom regulation. We also recognize that some behaviors are connected to language learning, and sometimes students may appear dysregulated when they're actually struggling to understand expectations or communicate their needs. And at the same time, some students do require more targeted behavioral support that goes beyond learning the English language. So this approach has allowed us to be both flexible and intentional, making sure students receive the right support at the right time. So what's next is always the big question. We're not 100% sure, but based on our current data, we will have a team meeting again in June. We'll review our data. We'll do some planning forward, but our thoughts right now are to maintain the supports in our ECS and grade 1 classrooms with our support staff. And then in terms of our complexity teacher, one of our biggest areas of focus has been ensuring that literacy intervention does not stop at the isolated phonics skills. So our goal, we're hopeful, is for students to continue to successfully transfer the foundational skills into authentic written communication. So through those quick writes and their sentence dictation and their vocabulary expansion, we're hoping to move forward with our writing in the fall. And that is how we have deployed our complexity team at Our Lady of the Rivers. So before we do a little bit of a share, we were just wondering if anyone had some questions for Kirsten or myself, and then we have a question to pose to you. Okay. Oops. So we would pose to you, in the context of growing complexity and limited funding, how are you strategically deploying support staff to maximize the impact? And thank you, Kelly, for asking the training for EAs, were they in-house or put on by external stakeholders? I'm thinking you're asking this specifically to the complexity team. Jen, do you want to share? Is this the complexity team or is this when we did our staff training? Staff training. So for staff training, we often try to partner with some of our community individuals. We are very blessed that we've got a lot of great connections in the community. So between us and Fort McMurray Public, sometimes we even collaborate. We invite the consortium for some of those more specific type training, but we also tap our SLPs, OTs, PTs for some of their training. We don't have in-house psychologists that do our assessments, but we have a group that we've contracted for 20 plus years that comes up to our community. And so sometimes they also do training. Senior leadership here from division office, we do training on a regular basis as well. So we find it from lots of different spaces and places. Thanks, Kelly, for the question. Thank you. We know that we got started a little bit on the late side. So Raymond, we're certainly open to perhaps closing out so our next friends can get started. I think just in closing, we would like to certainly say thanks for listening and being engaged with Jen and I this morning. At the system level, we think we have a pretty clear direction that we need to be more responsive in how we are allocating our staffing because, of course, there's realities on budget that haven't perhaps existed for us in some different ways before. And the goal is that we just want our students to receive the right supports at the right time in their buildings. So, but thank you for inviting us and thanks for having us today.
So thank you, Kirsten and Jen. Your story really highlights the data-rich things that you're doing. It was interesting just to hear about when you ask for data that you really tell the staff that this is not evaluative. It is more of being responsive so that you can make better decisions. That's that whole trust thing that you're really helping your people to do be in the right place to be able to respond to the needs that they're seeing. But thank you very much with this excellent collaborative approach to how you are you're meeting the needs of your kids. So with that, we are going to move on, and our next presenter, I would like to welcome Shelley Greenwood from Sturgeon School Division.
Hi, everyone. Also like to thank you for being here today and listening to our stories. I think we're all trying to figure out our best ways and best paths forward, and sometimes that comes with some bumps along the road. We have had some systemic changes that have changed our approach and our supports, and even some of the things that I'm sharing that were best practices are changing a little bit in our division just because of all the things we know, pressures of funding and staffing and all of that. So I'll just start with where Sturgeon is. Sturgeon is just north of Edmonton. We border Edmonton and Parkland, Pembina Hills, and Aspen View and Elk Island. So we're right kind of in the that donut around Edmonton. That might sound like a privilege, and in some cases it is, but in other cases We still have families that struggle to get supports for the kids that they desperately need, and we still face some of those rural difficulties that many other rural places also face. I think it's also important to recognize that staffing is still very difficult, even being close to an urban center, partially because, being just north of Edmonton, it is a commute. There are bad roads, bad weather, all those sorts of things. So we do have some impacts that way. To give a little more context, we do have a board of trustees. We have over 5,000 students from pre-kindergarten through grade 12. And we also have one Hutterite colony school, one EPI school, and two learning centers that are amalgamating to one that help us with home education, shared responsibility, and online learning. We also do tuition students into Edmonton for the Unlimited Potential Program school. And oh, there we go. So Sturgeon does spread all the way from St. Albert to Redwater. It is a vastly different look around St. Albert than it previously was. Our school used to be kind of in the middle of a farmer's field. Now it's engulfed in houses and next to a Walmart and across the street from a Costco. So very more urban feel in our St. Albert location. Whereas Redwater, which is where I live, I've been there since 2003. It hasn't changed at all. There's no Costco. We did get a Tim Hortons. That was pretty exciting. But our county population is about 20,000 people, and it's about 2,084 square kilometers. Our smallest school has 24 students in a very small rural school in Legal. And our Sturgeon Composite High School that's in Mayo has a little more than 983 kids now. Very different contexts, and you can imagine very different working conditions in those locations as well. There we go. I already talked about those. Oh, sorry, programming. We do have programming in our schools that is a little bit different. So there are my clicker is very slow. So we do have inclusive community schools. Most of our programming for students is in their community schools. We also have STEM programming academies, French immersion, Logos, which is a Christian faith-based program. We engaged in Building Futures this year, and we have an aviation flight school just outside of Villeneuve, which is west of Sturgeon, basically, and toward Parkland County. So it's a very unique place to work, from urban to rural to flight simulation and building a house. All of those things happen within our school division. It does make us very close-knit, and we know our employees and we know our families really well. And oftentimes we see them from pre-K when they're 2.8 years old all the way through to graduation, which is quite an awesome thing to get to see. It's quite a privilege. We have our educational assistants are part of the CUPE local. We do have 4 different classifications of EAs, and the role and number within those classifications is a little bit different. So our educational assistants 1, 2, and 3 are classroom-based supports. They have different levels of responsibility. And typically, our educational assistants at a level 1 have no formal education to support being an educational assistant. 2s either have on-the-job training or a diploma in being an educational assistant, and our 3s usually have some responsibility around supporting kids with medical needs or behavior or things like that. Our educational assistant 4s is where our EA coaches that I'll talk about a little bit later come in. We also have early childhood educators in our pre-K programming. We have LPNs to support a couple of our very high needs medical students. We have therapy assistants and office assistants, and then administrative assistants are all in our QP and are considered under the same classifications. I feel like I'm rambling, but I'll keep going. So to talk today just a little bit about how our framework works is we talk about the role, standards of practice, responsiveness programming, and then targeted professional development and coaching. I do feel like Kirsten spoke a lot about these things as well. So much of my conversation will be complementary to the practices that they also shared, including that targeted professional development and responsive programming. We have gone much more toward supporting our educational assistants in the work that they do day to day and professional development on the outside of that as well. So to talk about the role for our educational assistants, like Ramon was saying, has changed a lot over the years. In 2002, when I started, we had many educational assistants that really supported classrooms and teachers and did a lot of more of that classroom work. Whereas now our educational assistants are really there to be supportive for behavior, medical needs, and like toileting, and Kirsten talked about too. Um, and really, it has changed the role of the work that they have been doing. And many of our EAs have been with our division for that whole transition. So some of the things that we have to be attuned to in their role is really having an understanding of what they're actually experiencing. I would say, and I'm sure all of you would say, the number one difficulty is the student dysregulation and behavior. I think every time we do a survey and say, what do you need more help with, or what would you like more professional development with, it's how to deal with behavior. Sometimes autism fits in there in the behavior list as well, but they often go back to just that being regulated and being able to access learning in the classroom. Staff injury is another thing that we have really targeted to be responsive to. So we have incident reports where our staff report any incident of injury to themselves that's caused by a relationship with a child. There are the other reports of, fell down in the parking lot and things like that, but I don't analyze that part. We really work toward looking at what are the common incidents. Are there repetitive incidents of certain actions or responses? And then how do we best support that to change the trajectory of the students' ability to access learning and stay more regulated, and the staff members' sense of safety and ability to come to work and feel confident and supported. And then we also look at the students' learning and programming needs and look at what the programming looks inside the community classroom, but also in separate programming if that's considered necessary. One of the things that is important to consider for the role is a lot of times our incoming brand new teachers haven't had any education in how to work with educational assistants. And some of them haven't even had education in inclusive practices. I do know that our post-secondary institutions are going toward encouraging inclusive practice education and taking those courses, but we do have teachers coming in brand new that don't have any of that background. And we all know that every classroom has complexities related to learning. And so if the first time that our teachers are seeing it is day one when they stand in front of their class, that definitely makes it a very difficult learning curve. And then we say, and here's an adult to also support you, and they don't know what that person's role is or how they could best support. And sometimes that comes with building relationship with the EA and teacher team and them having a understanding and connection to work together. And it also leans into that vulnerability of when things go wrong, we often take that to heart, and our teachers and educational assistants, bear that and go home and think about it and what am I going to do differently and how could I have done, something to avoid that. And I think it's important that that relationship and that respect of the roles is clearly supported and understood. So we often do an activity with our beginning teachers cohort around what are the roles and responsibilities of the teacher and the EA and what are shared responsibilities, so that they can kind of see how all those pieces work together. It has been a really good icebreaker, essentially, in some of our early service teachers. We also have a beginning teachers cohort where we do spend some time working on how to best support in our classrooms and things like that. Waiting for it to click. There we go. So standards of practice. One of the things that we found in our division over the last 5 years or so was just there wasn't a community understanding of the role, or even between EAs and the different roles that they have in the schools. So we found it was important to really put together a handbook that best supports our educational assistants. So when we get a new educational assistant, one of our EA coaches goes out to meet with them and goes through the EA handbook. Some of the key things that are in there that are really helpful is just what does it mean to have that professionalism and working in a school, including things outside of school like that social media impact and things like that, and that you are always a school staff member, whether you're at the hockey arena or whether you're at the grocery store. We do talk about that difficulty because a lot of times our EAs are very, involved with their own kids in community sports and things like that. And so just really supporting them in how to have those conversations when someone says, well, what happened on the playground? And, they might have all the details, but the fact that they aren't to share that is kind of a tough position to be in when you are so involved in your community. We do talk about support staff evaluations and what that looks like, so that they know ahead of time what are the things that we're looking for in a strong EA. We also talk about lines of communication. So, your first step is to talk to the teacher that you're working with. And what does that look like? How can you open that door of conversation? And when is the most appropriate time to have those? We go over roles and responsibility as well, teaming and what that approach looks like, and then just processes like how to enter an absence and things like that. And trends that we often see when new EAs are starting is really a place of fear of, they're hoping to do their best. And of course, everyone comes in with really great intentions. And it can be tough because we expect them to hit the ground running and just do the job. And we've had, people that were volunteers in the school who, well, I've been at the school so much, I might as well just be an EA, to people that have, background in actual teacher training and diplomas in being an educational assistant and things like that. So really bridging that gap and having an understanding of where this person is and coming into their educational assistant journey. We also have a lot of questions around how to support kids who often have really great relationships with EAs and have mental health struggles or needs, and how do our EAs best respond when a student discloses to them. So we walk through what that should look like and how to get the support as the adult as well, especially after the fact, because it can be very difficult to have that information on your mind. And then we also spend a focused amount of time on how do we support kids in accessing learning. So what does that look like in the classroom, and how does that relate to the IPP goals that essentially they'll be informing with the data and observations that they have. I did see something was in the chat. I couldn't tell if it was a question or not.
I believe it was just a gentleman saying that you make a great point about new teachers not having experience with EAs. Even many experienced teachers need support about effective practice.
That is correct. Thank you for that comment. I do think and I don't know about your experience, but my experience when I was, uh, I'll give a little bit of a background. I taught for 11 years in a junior high, and of that time, I was a behavior teacher where I had grade 7, 8, 9 students who had essentially been expelled from other schools in our district and uh, had typical background of, Code 42, ODD, all those things. And I worked with some like phenomenal educational assistants. There's no way I could have done my job without them. It was not even possible. I moved into being the learning support lead and school counselor. And from there, I moved on to be a vice principal in a K-4 school. I will tell you that was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life, going from teaching grade 9 science to grade 2 language arts. Definitely a learning curve I wasn't expecting. And just the dynamics of K-4 schools and how kids are developing literally everything, their learning skills, their people skills, their life skills and all of those things. And then I moved on to a junior high again, where I was a vice principal and a principal. And then I moved into central office, where I'm the director of learning services for Sturgeon. So I've been with Sturgeon since 2002, and that progression has really seen a lot of change in our teaching practice, but also in our support practices as well, which lends into where we're going with responsive programming. So I think one of the most difficult things is to be timely enough that our staff feel really supported. And when a difficult situation happens, that they don't just walk back into the situation the next day without any debrief or opportunity to share their concerns, their observations, even their thoughts around what might be the next best step. And I think going back to the recommendations from the report that Ramon shared, is that collaborative piece of, they spend more time with these kids than the vast majority of the rest of us. So it seems silly that they're not at the table when we're talking about programming for kids and what best programming might look like. So I know that is one of the things that we've worked really hard on, is to have them at the table and have them sharing their experiences, because they truly have the day-to-day up front. We also, like I said, we have incident reports that help us understand the areas of need, and it informs us of, like, what kind of strategies were being used, where were these incidents happening, is there a common pattern or theme that we're seeing, and that also informs the professional development that we provide to them. It is difficult to see all of the things that are going on in all of the classrooms across a division, so it's important that they have an outlet to share that information with us. We also do professional development in what's called therapeutic crisis intervention for schools. It is a regulation, relationship, and trauma-informed program that really guides us to have common language, a common approach, and a common process, so that when we're working together, we can anticipate what our partners are going to do to best support us, and we're using the same language along the way, so we're really well understood. Our training, we have 30 train the trainers across the division, and every school has at least one train the trainer. So they bring that common language to life every day. We also train at least 2 cohorts a year of new people to be fully trained in TCIS. And the vast majority of our training now happens with teachers and educational assistants, but we didn't start there. We actually started with our system leadership. So our superintendent, deputy superintendent, HR, all of our principals, vice principals, everyone was fully trained in what TCIS is, so that it was able to be let out as a division directed way to support our schools. It also developed out of our EPI school. So we have a school called the Oak Hill School. It's on a ranch in Bonaccord, and all the students that attend there are in care, and they live on the ranch and then attend school on the ranch as well. They moved into therapeutic crisis intervention because of research that was done by Geraldo Rivera and then led into Cornell University, trying to understand why so many children who were in care were dying, actually. They discovered that how we were believed to be supporting kids was quite unsafe, especially when it came to restraints and things like that. And we were causing unknown damage that created really difficult situations for kids who were already in incredible life difficulties. So Cornell took that information and developed therapeutic crisis intervention to reduce the risk or need for restraint by improving regulation and child and adult understanding of that interoception, understanding what's going on in your body and how to practice those skills so that you can maintain regulation rather than having an outburst. And our Oak Hill School had, if you can imagine, there's 180 school days. They often averaged 190, 200 restraints in a school year. So that's more than one a day, basically, in the school when they only have 32 kids at max. So they started doing TCIS, and they've only had one restraint this school year. They didn't have any restraints last school year. They only had two the previous school year. So over time, they have seen that huge reduction, in staff dysregulation as well as student dysregulation, but having that common approach and kids having something that they can anticipate or predict was really helpful. So we take the information from the incident reports and the areas of need, we filter it into the TCIS system, and then we look for ways that we can best support our educational assistants in the work that they do every day. For step 4, that's where we talk about the professional development. We also, aside from TCIS, we do a survey with our educational assistants as well to determine what are the things that they are hoping for. And we host an educational assistant PD day where all of the topics are specifically related to the survey outcomes. And our educational assistant coaches host that. So sometimes it's peer-to-peer teaching and learning. Sometimes we have outside agencies. One of the most interesting and asked for repeatedly PDs was actually with the RCMP and understanding what's going on with youth in our communities. That is always a very interesting one to attend for anyone, to be entirely honest. We did do some of the Parabytes training. I don't know how many of you have heard about Parabytes, but it is something that was offered through APLC. They also have inclusion bites and leadership bites if you're interested in that. Most of the time we are asked to provide professional development around accessing learning. So we have adopted the ABLES and AFLS programming to help some of our kids with significant needs to be able to access learning more successfully. We also have been asked for specific PD around autism or the PDA profile, pathological demand avoidance, ADHD, ODD, OCD, FSCD, or FASD, trauma, intellectual disabilities, all those. And we also use the time during the teacher strike to really up our EA's PD because they had a lot of extra time to do that. Most importantly, we have that educational assistant coach who is our shoulder-to-shoulder support who show up on those tough days and really work work the role with them, help them navigate working with other adults and difficult situations that might come up for them, and try to create a path forward that feels responsive and appropriate. And I'm going to very quickly go through these slides. It'll feel a bit like a blur, but elevating EAs, so recognizing that they're a vital part of the school and really celebrating them and their work. I say, making sure that there's consistent training and a clear role so that they know what their job is, but also that everyone can work together to be successful. Best practices, so having that handbook, having a clear understanding. This is something we did talk about, having a province-wide standard of practice for educational assistance. Also responsive programming, so being available, looking at the data, making decisions related to what we actually see in their work. Providing them professional development that's really focused on the skills that they need and that they have. That coaching role as well, so it's job embedded, it's in their line of work, in their classroom with their kids. And then aligning funding, which I know not all of us on the screen have anything to do with that, but we align funding to best support what the complexities look like in our schools. We will all be far better off. And then there's questions. Ramon, do you want to take over?
Sure. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Shelley. Just because of time, I'm thinking that we'll just move on because we have one more story of practice, but you certainly can go back and review these questions on your own. And with that, I would like to welcome Lisa Lindsay from Prairie Rose School.
Hi, everybody. I can be really quick because lots of the slides that I have are really consistent with what Jen and Kirsten and Shelley have shared. Apologies in advance because I feel like I'm going to rush. Shelley, don't worry about it. So Prairie Rose Public Schools is a geographically expansive school division in southeastern Alberta. So we have about 29,000 square kilometers. We border Saskatchewan to the east and the United States to the south. And on this side, you can see where all of our schools are. And we also have 2 schools in Calgary. So, oh, okay, sorry, I became a crazy clicker. We have about 6,900 students in junior kindergarten through to grade 12. We have 20 public schools, 19 Hutterite colonies, and then 4 other programs as well. Cooley Collegiate, which is an online high school program. Home Plus is a online virtual school for grades 1 to 9. We have South Alberta High School, which has about 2,000 students across the province registered taking virtual asynchronous classes. The majority of those students are athletes who might be in a sport program outside of our province, but still want to retain the Alberta curriculum. And we also have a burgeoning alternative school called the Link School, which includes a CASA classroom for grades 6 to 9. We're just finishing our first semester with our CASA classroom. It looks like we might add a behavior and alternative program to the Link School. Just not sure how to do that given our geographical challenges. So most of what I talk about will focus around the challenges that we have given our location in the province. Oh, My slide went ahead. Okay, that's okay. We'll skip that last one. So how we support our educational assistants is through four basic principles. We have an orientation day for them every August, which is a full day. We focus, or we have over the past couple years, focused on safety, so psychological safety, emotional safety, and physical safety. We focus a lot on regulation and believe that regulated students are ready to learn. And unless we've met those regulation needs, we're going to have, the students are going to have challenges in the classroom. And we focus on trauma-sensitive approaches. Our EAs, we've allowed time in their daily calendar where they have opportunities to have informal and formal conversations with our school-based teams so that they do not feel isolated. Most of our EAs work with our students who have the highest needs. There is consistent touch points and team meetings around IPPs, behavior support plans, safety plans, medical support plans. And we've also, this year, the job action gave us a really cool opportunity to allow our EAs to engage in learning rounds where they got to go visit other schools and talk with each other and see what programming is looking like in other buildings. And it really helped to break down those silos that happen at the school level. We paid for a lot of mileage for those instructional rounds to happen, and look forward to continuing that next year. So training our EAs, we strongly believe in giving our EAs lots of professional learning opportunities because this will give them the skills they need to be successful in our classrooms. So literacy and numeracy intervention, we focus heavily on UFly, word origins. Sorry, I was just reading the chat. Executive functioning skills, and supporting positive behavior. We also have trauma-sensitive ways of being, skill building so that they do not feel isolated. And layer 3 on here is where we've probably placed the heaviest focus this year. We have a complex community of practice that I will talk about. And we speak a lot with our school leaders, our teachers, and our EAs about the importance of being flexible and able to pivot on any given day in order to meet the needs that are cropping up in our buildings. Okay, so our complex community of practice. In 34 years of being in education, this might be the most positive opportunity that I've engaged in. What we did is basically, after the last few years of seeing significantly increasing behavior complexity, and these might be students who maybe have a diagnosis, but often don't. And these are the students who just were not able to function in our classroom environments and often having aggressive, violent, and huge explosions and impacting the learning of others. We took a look at those students and developed some common criteria, which I'm happy to share out if anybody is interested, and identified about 12 students in our division. Those students have an EA, a teacher, a principal, and a learning support teacher attached to them. And what we did was brought them all in for 3 days of extremely in-depth professional learning, which was basically a collection of everything you would want to know about supporting behavior. So de-escalation, the ABCs of behavior, the neuroscience behind the brain, and the amygdala hijack, we took all of that. We talked about attachment and regulation and building competency. And I think the most important thing that has come out of that community of practice. So again, 3 days of in-person, in-depth PD, and then we've done 3 more virtual days with this community of practice. The biggest piece of feedback that we have gotten is, sure, learning about behavior and learning how to support behavior and learning how to de-escalate is really important, but they found so much value in the ability to just talk with each other and share ideas, and just really in a safe, respectful, and solution-focused environment, they were able to put problems of practice on the table and just share. And that had such a deeper impact than, somebody standing at the front of the room delivering professional learning. One of our biggest goals with that was to allow them to leave those days feeling like there's people that they can reach out to. They felt heard, and they feel like people have their back. And we will continue to do this work next year. We'll probably expand it a little bit, just because it has had such a positive response. Thankfully, our executive team believes in the importance of doing this work face to face, because it does come with a financial cost, and we really had to balance the days, the in-person days, because we don't want to pull a student's entire support network away from them. And so it was tricky, but also very, very rewarding for everybody who took part in it. A lot of what came out of that at the bottom of this visual is, I don't know if any of you remember when you're a new teacher and you get the Harry Wong book. There's definitely a thirst for bringing back Harry Wong in our division, and just talking about routines, procedures, consistency in our classrooms, really explicit teaching of behaviors we want to see universally across our schools. What are those behaviors? How do we teach them? How do we practice them? And how do we keep that living? And so can tell by how I'm talking about it, it's super exciting. And we really feel like we're onto something there. So that's our complex community of practice. Feedback from our EAs, where do we need to go next? They're still looking for more relationship-based de-escalation strategies, positive behavior supports. How do they continue to be trauma-informed? Behavior 101, which is what we're calling it. Shelley also mentioned Parabytes, Behavior 360, inclusive learning, circles from the start. Those are excellent little snippets of professional learning that people can turn to whenever they just need something. Our EAs also want more professional learning on how to understand some of the diagnoses our students are coming with, especially ASD, ADHD, ODD, some of those mental health diagnoses, especially anxiety and depression, which we've seen an increase in diagnoses of, and functional behavior assessment basics, like how do we watch for antecedents and triggers, and how do we really think intentionally about the consequences when a behavior occurs. They want us to continue to focus on collaborative practices, student communication supports, especially AAC, and visuals. Visual schedules are really important when a student has the potential to become dysregulated and needs that predictability. We've also increased our FTE for a full-time EA from 27.5 hours to a minimum of 30 hours. And this is where that ability to collaborate comes into play. Many of our EAs working with our complex students will get an increase to 32 to 33 hours, so that their time is not just with that student. Can we go to the next slide? I don't know if my mouse is working or it's just really delayed. Oh, sorry. Okay, this is the last one. We've done through Edmonton Public Schools, we've done the internship. 75 out of our 125 EAs have already completed it, and they love it. We have one EA coach and mentor who is excellent and will her job is to work alongside EAs who just need maybe a coaching conversation or a consult or even a day or two of working alongside an EA and a student. What we're looking for, and others have said, it would be great to have training standards for EAs across the province that would help, I think, align consistent professional learning and clarity for our EAs. As Shelley mentioned, sustainable and consistent funding models. We're really grateful for what we've gotten. There's a lot of work to be done. And I guess the formal recognition of the EA role, especially within our complexity teams that are managing really extreme and complicated and historical behavior and medical support. And I just didn't want to be remiss in letting those points go unsaid because I think we're on the right track as a province. I just think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, recognizing the importance of the EA role for our children. So I will stop there. Phew.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. I apologize for the time because if we would have loved to have heard more of your story, but I can say I think for everyone here today that we've got some really good feedback from our three school authorities, and it just was a great presentation. And there's so many things that we can pull out of that. I'll when I'm writing the learning guide, I will ensure that we pull out the themes from all three of these stories so that you can have that at your fingertips. It was just a great session today. I want to thank everyone for being here. And the screen is right there. So thank you to CAS Professional Learning, to our team from Fort McMurray, Kirsten and Jen from Sturgeon Public Schools, Shelley, and of course, Prairie Rose Public School, Lisa. And also thank you, Rogan, today for your assistance. And for everyone here, just for being here today. And we know that this is a really crucial topic for everyone across Alberta. So hopefully there's going to be some more work done in this area so that we can have some consistency. And there's some really great ideas that our school authorities are bringing forth that will just make a big difference for our educational assistants and for our kids ultimately with what they need. And thanks again for being here. And thank you to all of our presenters. Have a great day, everyone.